It's now time to introduce you to the Ivy League financial aid pre-read process. This process is similar to the admissions pre-read process that we've already covered, but one of the major differences is that in the admissions pre-read process, the student athlete works with the coach, and the coach works with the admissions department. It's unusual that there's ever direct communication between the admissions department and the student athlete. The coach almost always acts as a liaison between those two. Now, in the financial aid pre-read process, almost all of the communication happens directly between the student athlete and their parents and the Office of Financial Aid. There are a few things that the coach does during the process, but they're much less involved in this process. Rather than relying on only the financial aid calculator, this financial aid pre-read process is an opportunity to provide the student athlete with an exact number for what they will pay for the upcoming year if they attend that school. This process oftentimes happens in the summer before a student athlete's senior year, but it can also happen all the way into the winter of a student athlete's senior year. The process has to be initiated by the coach. So the coach determines whether or not the student athlete is at a level at which they may give a support slot. If they determine that this student athlete is at a certain level where they're recruitable, then they can initiate the process by taking a few pieces of simple information down from the student athlete, typically really just contact information from the student athlete. So the coach will ask the student athlete for full name, home address, and email, and the financial aid office will take it away from there. They will send an email out to the student athlete, and at that point, the student athlete will work directly with financial aid through the financial aid portal online, and all that information is provided in the email, how to set up your portal and what information needs to be submitted. And once all the information is submitted to financial aid will send out an official pre-read, which will be exactly how much you would need to pay in the upcoming school year if you were to attend that school. Now, from time to time, there are some back and forth that needs to happen. So if all the information is not provided correctly to financial aid, they may have questions before they produce the pre-read. Additionally, if the student or the family is not happy with the pre-read, they may go back to financial aid to speak further. Usually financial aid, if they have all the information they need financially, they're going to produce a read and they won't make it any better. They just say, this is what it is. You either take it or leave it. But from time to time, the student and the family are able to explain extenuating circumstances and the read can be adjusted. Now, again, all through this process, it's important to recognize and understand the perspective of the other side of the equation, not just the perspective of the student athlete. So the financial aid offices have a lot of work to do. They are working on financial aid pre-reads for the students who are already attending the school. They're working on all different kinds of things. And so they limit the number of financial aid pre-reads that they will do for athletes. And every Ivy League school is going to be a little bit different. They may not have exactly the same number, but there are a limited number. So coaches can't just come in with an indefinite number of pre-reads that they want. So if you're getting a pre-read, then that's a pretty good indication that that coach is serious about you. It doesn't mean they're going to give you a support slot, but it means that they're serious about recruiting you. It is Ivy League policy that if you are recruited by an Ivy League school, that you should be entitled to an official financial aid pre-read. And that's a pretty reasonable policy because you should know what it costs exactly to go to a school if you're being recruited by them, because that's an important piece to the puzzle when you're determining whether or not you want to attend the school. But like we've mentioned in relation to other Ivy League policies in this course, just because it's an Ivy League policy or it's a rule does not mean that all coaches are going to abide by that rule. There can be some monkey business that happens here, and not every coach is going to abide by that rule. So there are certain strategic reasons why an Ivy League coach might not want to give you an official pre-read. And this is something that student athletes run into from time to time because coaches play games and they strategize themselves. We're going to cover that in the next section, but maybe you can think a little bit about why someone might not want to give you a financial aid read. And if you somehow figure it out before I give you the answer, then give yourself a proper pat on the back. One hint I can give you is that Harvard, Princeton, and Yale typically have the best and strongest financial aid packages in the Ivy League. Another important note on financial aid in the Ivy League is that you can be eligible for full financial aid, meaning that you would attend the school without paying anything. And you can be eligible for no financial aid, meaning you will be responsible for paying tuition, fees, room and board, everything. And you can also be eligible for any amount of financial aid in between those two ends of the spectrum. So that's why it's very important to punch your numbers into the estimator, also known as the calculator, to find out what you're eligible for. It's time to talk about matching. So if you have acquired financial aid pre-reads from multiple Ivy League schools, so you've gone through the full process, the coach has collected your name, home address, email, and then you've gotten emails from the financial aid department at multiple Ivy League schools. You've submitted all the information to each one of those schools, and you get your official financial aid pre-read back. It's possible that those pre-reads are going to look a little bit different. So let's say you have a pre-read from Brown, Dartmouth, and Yale. Maybe Brown might have the worst financial aid read by a little bit. Dartmouth might be a little bit better than Brown's, and Yale's might be better than all three. But if you decide, I want to go to Dartmouth and not to Yale, but Yale's price is better, so how can I decide to go to Dartmouth? There's a process in the Ivy League that is called the matching process. And the purpose behind the matching process is the Ivy League doesn't want student athletes to decide to go to one Ivy League over another Ivy League because the price is better. And this is great news for you because what you can do is you can take the Yale financial aid read and you can submit it to the coach at Dartmouth and you can request that they do a match. And the Dartmouth coach will typically be able to submit that read to the Dartmouth Office of Financial Aid. Now, this is one of the areas, the few areas during the financial aid pre-read process that the coach acts as a liaison between the student athlete and the Office of Financial Aid. The first place they act as a liaison is when they collect the information from the student and submit it to the admissions department. Now, the reason in these moments that they're acting as a liaison, the purpose of that is the Office of Financial Aid needs to know that this student has the coach's blessing, essentially, to move forward in this financial aid pre-read process. So just because you're a student athlete, you can't just reach out to the Dartmouth Financial Aid office and ask for a pre-read. You can do your estimator or your calculator online. That's for free. Anybody can do that. But this official pre-read process is for athletes only, and that's determined by the coach who gets one of these. So the coach acts as a liaison in the first step, and then if there's the potential to match, or a student athlete wants a match, this is another instance where the coach is going to act as a liaison because the coach is going to determine whether or not they want that student athlete to get a match. Now, usually it's not so hard to get a match, but there are limited funds within the financial aid departments at some of these universities for matching financial aid reads from other Ivy Leagues. So if for some reason every student athlete that you were recruiting at one Ivy League school needed a match from another school that had better financial aid, you may not be able to do all of those. And so every financial aid office has a different budget. And the ones with the big budgets can do all the matches that they want. And the ones with the smaller budgets may be limited on the number of matches that they can give. So this is a moment where the coach, again, needs to give the blessing of the student athlete to go for the match. When a match is made, keep in mind that they're typically only matching the tuition need-based financial aid. So if schools are calculating their fees and room and board a little bit differently. Sometimes you'll get a match back and it'll be exactly the same dollar to dollar as the other university's financial aid read. But other times you'll get a match back and the tuition need-based aid is the same, but the room and board might be a little bit different. And so you may be up to about $1,000 in difference from that other read. So it could be better than the other read, but it could also be a little bit worse just based on the way that they calculate cost of living in certain areas and how much room and board costs.